A grocery clerk with no training found a city that professional archaeologists couldn't. How? Heinrich Schliemann, a pastor's son who claims he taught himself 15 languages and became a millionaire by 34, walked into Turkey and dug up the most famous lost city in history, first try. But when you check his dates against a calendar, the math collapses. There is not enough time in his life for what he claims, so we checked everything else too. Heinrich Schliemann was born in 1822 in the German Duchy of Mecklenburg-Schwerin, just 8 years after the Napoleonic Wars. His father was a poor village pastor. At 11, he entered a gymnasium. At 14, he entered a gymnasium. At 14, he dropped out and supposedly began 5 years of pure self-education. Picture this: a 14-year-old dropout, son of a poor pastor, spending the next 5 years exclusively on self-education. In an era with no internet, no public libraries in rural Germany, no free universities, where did the money come from? And what exactly was he studying? So where did a broke teenager get all those books? At 19, he suddenly appears in Amsterdam, not as a clerk or apprentice, but as a full partner in a trading company. By 24, he is the firm's representative in St. Petersburg. A poor self-taught teenager, a company partner in 4 years. A rapid career leaps like this: a 22-year-old running a major firm, a dropout becoming a foreign trade representative, usually signal powerful sponsors operating behind the scenes. Schliemann's rise follows that same pattern. And then it gets stranger. By 25, he had Russian citizenship. Within 10 more years, he was a millionaire from the California Gold Rush and the Crimean War. He claims he learned 15 languages during this same period. Let's do the arithmetic on that. Between 1856 and 1859, Schliemann claims to have traveled across the United States, Europe, and the Middle East, a grand world tour. But here is where it gets truly strange. Another figure from Russian history, Alexander Lassier, made an almost identical globe-trotting journey during exactly the same years, 1856 to 1859. The overlap is difficult to explain as coincidence. Lassier eventually returned to Russia, but Schliemann did not. He took American citizenship in 1869. Russia had served its purpose. The millions had been made. Now came the real mission. The archaeological consensus places Troy at Hisarlik, Turkey, a site excavated by multiple teams over more than a century. Mainstream scholarship considers the identification well supported. Understanding that consensus is essential before examining what doesn't fit. But Schliemann never doubted for a single second that Troy was there, before he even started digging. After listening to just 2 semesters of lectures at the University of Paris, Schliemann became interested in the historical accuracy of Homer's Iliad. He then sailed to Turkey, to the town of Çanakkale, with one goal: find Troy. Homer describes 2 large rivers encircling a flat plain elevated above the sea. At Çanakkale, there is only one small creek. The site is 4 to 6 kilometers from the shore, no port, no control over maritime trade. This doesn't add up. So how did he know where to dig? In 1870, he obtained the permit from the Ottoman government and immediately began digging, and as you might expect, he found ruins. Turkey is one enormous open-air museum of ancient civilizations. You can dig almost anywhere and hit something ancient. Here is where the story becomes almost comical. Schliemann's inexperienced team accidentally destroyed the exact archaeological layer that would have corresponded to Homer's Troy. They dug right through it, demolishing the evidence, and started excavating much older layers beneath. The one layer that mattered, gone forever. The one piece of evidence that could settle the debate, erased by the man who found it. Other archaeologists immediately noticed the problems, but Schliemann had an answer for every doubt. He produced what he called Priam's treasure, kilograms of gold that supposedly belonged to the king of Troy, a find so dazzling that the scientific world's skepticism largely evaporated. His obsession went beyond professional. Schliemann named his two children from his second marriage after Trojan War characters, his daughter Andromache after Hector's wife, and his son Agamemnon after the king who led the war against Troy. After his son was born, Schliemann carried the infant to the rooftop, performed a son dedication ceremony, and touched the baby's head with a copy of Homer, not a Bible, Homer. That child, Agamemnon Schliemann, grew up to become a member of the Greek parliament, an American citizen in the Greek parliament. A man who baptizes his child with Homer instead of scripture. That level of conviction needs explaining. So let's lay out what we actually know. The site Schliemann found doesn't match Homer's geography. The critical evidence layer was destroyed during excavation. The gold treasure appeared at exactly the right moment to silence critics, and the man himself has a biography that collapses under basic chronological scrutiny. This raises an uncomfortable question. What if Schliemann wasn't an eccentric genius? What if he was someone backed by powerful interests, given money, languages, and connections, whose task was to establish Troy in a very specific, pre-approved location? And if so, why would anyone go to such extraordinary lengths to control where Troy was found? Why would the location of a Bronze Age city matter to anyone in 1870? To answer that, we need to understand what the Trojan War actually was, because despite what Hollywood tells us, I was not about a beautiful woman named Helen. It wasn't even really about humans. According to the ancient sources, the Trojan War was the last battle of the gods. Every ancient civilization on Earth begins with gods, hundreds of them. They are in every epic, every tradition, every mythology, from Greece to India to Mesoamerica. The gods were literally everywhere. They interacted with humans, built cities, fought wars, and then, in one precise historical moment, they all vanished. Every single one. Mainstream historians call this period the Late Bronze Age collapse, around 1200 BC. Multiple civilizations fell in rapid succession. The causes are debated: drought, earthquakes, invasion by the sea peoples. What is not debated is that something catastrophic happened across the entire ancient world. Within that collapse, something else happened that is rarely discussed: the boundary between the age of gods and the age of man. Before this line, divine beings appear in every text. After it, they are gone. The last 2000 years of history are purely human, pragmatic, bloody, rational, no centaurs, no cyclopes, no miracles, just war after war after war. And the Trojan War sits right on that boundary. If you remove the gods from ancient history, you realize something disturbing. We know almost nothing about the period before them. They are not decoration in the story, they are the story. Without them, there is only a void. So when did this boundary fall? The evidence suggests it was the Trojan War itself. That war was not merely a human conflict with divine spectators. It was the final act of a civil war among the gods. And to see it clearly, you need to look at who was actually fighting whom. On the Trojan side, Apollo, Aphrodite, Ares, Artemis, Scamander, Leto, Zeus's current favorites, his lovers, their children. These were the establishment gods, the Olympian loyalists. On the Greek side, Hera, Athena, Poseidon, Hephaestus, Hermes, and the sea nymph Thetis. Every single one of them had been personally wronged by Zeus. So what did Zeus do to make half the gods turn against him? Hera, his discarded wife. Athena, daughter of his first wife, whom Zeus had swallowed whole after learning she might birth his destroyer. Poseidon, his own brother, bitter at being denied supreme power. Hephaestus, thrown off a cliff by Zeus and crippled for life. Hermes, son of Zeus's affair with the daughter of Atlas, Prometheus's brother. In other words, the Greek side of the Trojan War was a revenge coalition. The same gods who had once been defeated in the Titanomachy, the original war against the Titanoma, had regrouped. They rallied behind Achilles, who the source argues was not just any hero, but quite possibly the secret son of Zeus himself. The timeline supports this. Achilles' supposed father, Peleus, had sailed with the Argonauts around 1270 BC. The Trojan War began around 119 BC. Even if Peleus was only 15 during the Argonaut voyage, he would have been over 90 at the time of the wedding with Thetis. A decrepit old man, no heir was possible from that union. A 90-year-old father to the greatest warrior who ever lived. There's a problem here. And Thetis resisted the marriage with everything she had, transforming into fire, water, a lion, a snake, a tree. This was not a shy bride. This was a goddess desperately fighting a forced arrangement because the real father of a child was someone she needed to protect at all costs. But before the Trojan War could begin, something had to happen first. The one person strong enough to defend Troy for Zeus, his son Heracles, had to be removed from the board. Troy had been built by the gods themselves. Apollo and Poseidon personally constructed its walls by Zeus's command. Heracles had already conquered Troy once, on just 18 ships. He killed the old king, installed Priam as a temporary ruler, and planned to return as supreme king. For Zeus, Heracles was the chosen one, the future king of kings. But then came the poison, a cloak soaked in the blood of the centaur Nessus, laced with hydra venom. His wife Deianira, tricked by a dead centaur's last words, sent it to him as a love charm. When Heracles put it on, it burned through his flesh. In agony, he begged to be burned alive, and from Olympus, Athena descended to collect what remained. With Heracles gone, Troy was defenseless, and the timing was no accident. Heracles was made a god, which meant he could no longer interfere in mortal affairs. The strongest piece on Zeus's side of the board was neutralized, and exactly 4 years after this event, the fateful wedding feast took place. The chain of events leading to the Trojan War had begun. And behind all of it, orchestrating the revolt, pulling every string, was one being whose name keeps surfacing at every turn of this story: Prometheus. The same Prometheus who stole fire, the same one who created humanity from clay, the same one Zeus chained to a rock for eternity. The source argues that Prometheus spent centuries preparing a revolt against Zeus. Operating under the name Yahweh, he gathered divine artifacts that remained scattered on earth after a mass disappearance of godly equipment: the staff of the pharaohs, the Ark of the Covenant, the garments of Adam and Eve, and other devices whose names we do not even know. If the gods were real, what happened to their technology? So the Trojan War was not caused by Paris stealing Helen. That was merely the trigger mechanism. The real war had been building for generations. On one side, Zeus's loyalists defending Troy and his dynasty. On the other, a revenge coalition of wronged gods, mortal armies, and behind the curtain, Prometheus pulling every thread. And Zeus? During the war, his behavior was erratic. Homer describes him gathering all the gods on Olympus, threatening terrible punishment on anyone who interferes, and then suddenly smiling, saying he was just joking, as if drunk, or as if someone had already compromised him. One key question remains: why did the gods have to use humans at all? The source offers a striking answer. The atmosphere had been failing, pressure dropping catastrophically. The Titans, these enormous beings, could no longer survive on the surface. Only humans, small enough to endure the thinning air, could fight the wars now. This was humanity's real purpose in this framework: not worship, not philosophy. We were created as proxy soldiers in a divine civil war, given language, given the impression of autonomy, given money as a motivational system, and the religion as a counterbalance to prevent self-destruction. Proxy soldiers who thought they were fighting for honor. the oldest trick in any general's playbook. Troy itself was not just any city. The source argues it was the most important port in the ancient world, a trade hub where sea routes met river routes, penetrating deep into the continent. Homer's description matches this, a vast plain elevated above the sea, encircled by two major rivers. The source's controversial claim, the real Troy, was not in Turkey. It was modern-day Taganrog, Russia, on the Sea of Azov, at the confluence of the Don and Mayas rivers, forming a vast coastal plain. The channel has an entire series of films presenting this evidence, but for now, what matters is the implication. If the real location was different, then Schliemann was sent to establish a false one. The war lasted 10 years. Achilles killed every major champion the Trojans could field. Hector, Memnon the Ethiopian king, Penthesilea the Amazon queen. Troy should have fallen, but it didn't. Its walls, built by gods, held. Something had to change. Time was running out. The source says it was burning the ground under the gods' feet, literally. They could feel something terrible approaching, a catastrophe. The urgency forced Odysseus to devise the trick with the wooden horse. Troy had to fall now, or never. Troy fell. But what happened next is the real story. When the victorious Greek fleet set sail for home, they were hit by a storm of unimaginable violence. Nearly every ship was destroyed. The greatest army the ancient world had ever assembled was erased in a single night. They won the war, and then something worse than war arrived. Odysseus was thrown far south. In his 10-year journey home, he encountered empty coastlines, deranged giants, floating metal islands run by unknown beings, and a world that seemed to be falling apart. Virgil, describing Aeneas's parallel escape, writes of icy winters and frozen seas in the Mediterranean, something that should be physically impossible. Both Aeneas and Odysseus spent years trying to get home. Both spent roughly 7 years hiding in underground shelters. During that time, massive stones fell from the sky into the Black Sea. Unprecedented cold gripped the Mediterranean. Populations across Europe and Asia were devastated. Something far worse than a war had happened. The Trojan War, then, was the final power struggle before the end. The gods knew the catastrophe was coming. They were not fighting over Helen. They were fighting over who would control the surviving human populations, who would have dynasties, who would be remembered. Aeneas, a prince of Troy, son of the goddess Aphrodite, escaped and eventually founded what would become Rome. He was the compromise candidate, acceptable to all factions. Zeus, Hera, Prometheus, all could tolerate Aeneas as humanity's leader, for a while. After the Terminator line, the gods are gone from all human records. Simultaneously, across every culture, no more divine interventions, no more cyclops or centaurs, no more miracles beyond the disputed resurrection of one figure, just humans alone in an age of blood and iron. And now we return to Heinrich Schliemann, standing in that Turkish field in 1870, with his unexplained fortune and impossible biography. If the real Troy was somewhere else, if its location held secrets about underground shelters and the true history of civilization, then finding it in the wrong place was not incompetence. It was the mission. So what is actually under the ground at the real location? Consider the location the source proposes as the real Troy, Taganrog. On old maps from the 18th and 19th centuries, a strange object is marked near the city, a massive stone shaft descending into the earth, called Petrushina Truba. From the Greek petra, stone, a stone pipe going underground, an entrance. Today, that exact spot is occupied by a military aviation factory, the Beriev aircraft plant. Access is virtually impossible, and the entire sewage system of Taganrog converges on the neighboring village of Petrushino, because, as we know, modern utilities love to repurpose ancient underground tunnels. If you wanted to redirect attention from the real location of Troy and whatever lies beneath it, what would you do? You would fund a well-connected figure to establish a discovery somewhere else. You would produce spectacular gold finds to satisfy skeptics. You would make sure the critical evidence layer was destroyed, and you would build a restricted facility on top of the actual entrance. Troy was not just a city. According to the ancient sources, it was actually a confederation, a triad of three kingdoms ruled by three branches of the same family. The word Troy itself may derive from the concept of a triumvirate: three kings, three lands, one alliance. The people of Troy were not called Trojans in most ancient texts. They were called Teucrians, a name for an entire nation. And the source draws a provocative connection. The Crimean Peninsula was anciently called Tauris. Its people, the Taurians, phonetically remarkably close to Teucri. Even the Amazons fit this geography better. Their army was entirely cavalry, requiring vast steppes for grazing and maneuver. Turkey has no such terrain, but the Azov steppe from Romania to the Caucasus has unlimited grassland. Archaeological finds of female warrior burials cluster in exactly this region. After the fall of Troy, Virgil tells us Aeneas fled past the island sacred to Achilles, the Serpent Island in the Black Sea. The same island fought over in actual conflicts of our own era. If Aeneas was leaving from Turkey, sailing to this island makes no sense, but from the Sea of Azov, it is directly on the route to Italy. If Aeneas was escaping from Turkey, his route through the Black Sea past Serpent Island means going backwards. But from the Azov region, the route is perfectly logical, past Serpent Island, through the Dardanelles, along the coast to Crete, and onward to Italy. Geography doesn't change, even when the maps are redrawn. After Troy, both Aeneas and Odysseus describe a world in collapse. Coastlines emptied. Crete, an enormous island, somehow deserted when Aeneas passes through. Apollo appears and forbids them to stay, as if even the last divine beings were evacuating before something worse arrived. And then silence. After the storms, after the catastrophe, after the long journeys home, the gods are simply gone. No more Apollo directing travelers, no more Athena rescuing heroes, no more the Athena rescuing heroes, no more Zeus hurling thunderbolts. The Terminator line has passed. Humanity is alone. Let's connect the dots. The gods disappeared at the exact moment of the Trojan War, a simultaneous departure across every culture on Earth. The war was their final power struggle, a chess game played with human armies. And thousands of years later, someone spent millions to make sure we look for Troy in the wrong place. Think about what is under the real Troy, if the source is correct. An entrance to an underground world, the same shelters where the gods retreated as the atmosphere failed. The same structures that all ancient mythologies describe. The underworld, Hades, the realm of the dead, not a metaphor, an actual place. The gods didn't die, they didn't ascend to heaven. According to this framework, they went deeper underground. The surface had become uninhabitable for beings their size, and they left us to build civilization in their absence, following systems they had already put in place: money, religion, ambition, fear. Schliemann's millions could have gone to many things. They went to one thing: planting a flag on a Turkish hillside and declaring to the world Troy was here. He presented skeptics with gold he claimed was Priam's treasure. With that single act, every researcher for the next 150 years would dig in the wrong country. The pattern continued through his family. His son Agamemnon Schliemann, dedicated to Homer at birth, became a member of the Greek Parliament, then Greek ambassador to the United States, an American citizen embedded in Greek governance. The influence didn't end with Schliemann, it was designed to perpetuate itself. And there is one more detail. The Trojan War's geography, the Sea of Azov, Taganrog, has been fought over in every major conflict since. The Crimean War, Napoleon's March, both world wars. Even the Ottoman vizier, in treaty negotiations, specifically demanded that Taganrog not be excavated, not destroyed, not excavated, as if he knew. We are not claiming any of this as proven fact. We are following anomalies, and there are too many of them to ignore. A biography that doesn't fit in a calendar, a discovery site that contradicts its own source material, a critical evidence layer conveniently erased. The Trojan War was not mythology's most famous love story. The evidence suggests it was the final battle in a civil war between advanced beings, gods, titans, whatever you want to call them, fighting over who would inherit a dying world. And when it was over, they all disappeared behind a line in history that no one even knew was there. 150 years ago, a man with no credentials and an impossible life story was given the task of telling us where Troy was. He pointed to a hillside in Turkey. The entire academic world followed his finger, and few people checked the calendar. Maybe there is nothing under Taganrog. Maybe Schliemann was just a lucky eccentric. Maybe the gods are just stories. But if you are the kind of person who checks the dates, who reads the footnotes, who wonders why a military factory sits on top of an ancient stone shaft, then this story is not over. It has barely begun. The age of the gods ended at the walls of Troy. The age of questions about what really happened there. That is the age we are living in now. And someone, a long time ago, went to a great deal of trouble to make sure we would